Butler's day begins early. He does whatever necessary to ensure the continuity and comfort of his master's daily life. It is all part of the Butler aesthetic.
Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're covering Black Butler's Book of Circus arc, or Season 3.
Yes, it took us a while to return to this series, but we finally managed to see one of the newer seasons after being released on Crunchyroll.
Mm-hmm.
Now this one focuses on Ciel and Sebastian going undercover as circus performers to locate children that have gone missing, and we were surprised to see that this time it's the first story arc that's actually canon to the manga.
Yes. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get some future podcasts and other pause videos.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us and subscribing. We appreciate your support so much.
Yes.
Now, what's really interesting about this particular series is that this is the third and the fourth season actually came out this year.
Yeah, right.
And prior to the fourth season, there was a movie called The Atlantic?
The Book of Atlantic.
Book of Atlantic. So it's still going. It's pretty popular. And I don't know if the mangaka ever expected it. This manga is 34 volumes, still going presently.
Right.
Originally beginning its run in September of 2006.
Right. And we had no idea it had been running that long. We had watched the anime a couple years ago when it was available on Netflix, the first 2 seasons and the set of OVAs, and even a live action movie that was nothing like the show. And we kind of thought that was the end. Like maybe just didn't get renewed and it ends on something unresolved or open interpretation. Then finding out about this one, we thought, oh, though they came back with a new story. And then finding out from other people and videos that this is now actually what's in the manga. Everything else that came before it, before Book of Circus, was non-canon, anime only. They made up their own stories.
Yes. And what's interesting about this one is you can tell that the feel is different when you watch it. So for those of you not familiar, Black Butler is a dark comedy, dark fantasy, and supernatural, written by Yana Tomoso.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned, it originally began its run in September 2006 with 34 volumes. The first season was 24 episodes, followed by a second season of 12 episodes. Third season, Book of Circus, was short with 11
Yeah,
episodes.
10 or 11 episodes.
And then there's OVA as well. They're absolutely hysterical 2-part theatrical video animation that we've also seen. So as Rascal mentioned, it took us a while to get back to the series. They premiered it finally on Netflix.
Yeah.
The first and second season of the OVAs.
Right.
And we were waiting the longest time, years literally, for it to come out, and it didn't come out and it wasn't on Crunchyroll. Finally, everything's available on Crunchyroll to watch now. So if you haven't seen it, there's an opportunity for you too.
Yes.
One of the stands out about this particular series, before we get to this season, are the voice actors. And one of our favorites, J. Michael Tatum,
Of course.
voices Sebastian. And the voice that he uses for Sebastian makes him one hell of a butler.
Right.
And we were also surprised to find out that that is not canon to the manga
No.
either.
It's called Demon of a Butler, and it's like, that doesn't sound right. And then we would have thought that the stuff that's canon doesn't actually sound right.
So he's really a favorite, really huge favorite, and it was surprising to find out just how well loved this particular series and manga are. So, as you mentioned, Sebastian is voiced by J. Michael Tatum, and C.L. Phantomhide, who is, I guess you could say, the co-star or co-MC, is voiced by Brina Palencia, who you also may know from AOT as well as Assassination Classroom as Nagisa. And she is fantastic as CL.
Yes.
So we were really happy to find out about Book of Circus. It's much more different than we expected.
Yeah, it was, because as you said, the tone of the first 2 seasons were different from this. And now knowing this part of the manga, the characters also acted differently. It had a much more serious tone to it. Not saying the first two weren't like that either, but it seemed like it wasn't really a mix of horror and dark comedy and things. It was just kind of really a heavy story with bad things happening to both good and bad people, and Ciel's backstory was no joke, which of course it wasn't before, but they made sure you knew this was not something to take lightly. Even Sebastian's powers were differently, how he worked was differently, everything was restructured, now more like the manga. So when this came about, and they had like the end of the season and season 4, you kind of understood why they had to make it more lighthearted. Because public school is actually really lighthearted until the last one or two episodes. The second to last episode, and then the last episode is all comedy again. So they really needed to balance out the darkness of this with a whole season of something making a parody.
Now, Ciel is known as the Queen's watchdog, and yet again, she asked him to go and investigate some going-ons for the Book of Circus. As we mentioned, lots of children have gone missing.
Yeah.
And they realize there's a connection to the circus that's in town. You have your cavalcade of stars, the performers during this time period, what they were known as, and the different performances and acts that they did.
Right.
And in the beginning, it doesn't start off as horrific and hard-hitting.
Right.
You're kind of not sure where it's going to go. But as Rascal mentioned, you have an episode where they actually start showing what has happened to Ciel. If you haven't read the manga like we haven't, we were horrified that these things happened to him. And now you kind of understand more why Sebastian, besides the contract, just stays around him pretty much and protects him. And we're like, wow, we didn't expect that. And then the last episode got more horrific than the entire season.
Yeah.
And the circus performers, yes, they are criminals, they are dirty, they are doing things, they are involved. We find they're connected, not only doing things, but also connected with the man who has taken care of them from childhood and reared them as his own. And because of that, they tended to do things that they knew weren't right for him.
Right.
And in the last episode, all of this crescendos into this cataclysmic finale where they're taken out and you find out how horrible the man is.
Yeah.
That they discover the children are at his residence.
And his real bad mental issues. Yeah, it gets really hard when it hits to that point, because it's like almost like a slow, not a slow burn, but like a slow effect, like the rising tension, like the more you see this guy and how it started and why he started doing it, it just gets worse and worse, and you're like, you need to like get rid of him now.
And he wants to impress Ciel because he's the Queen's watchdog, and he starts this macabre performance of these children that he's kidnapped. And when you see the children, the things he's done to them, the brainwashing and the torture and things, you know they'll never be the same again. You know there's no help for them. You can tell by their behaviors and movements in their eyes, and Ciel can see it as well. And that last episode is even more heart-wrenching than seeing what happened to Ciel in the past, because he's triggered back to that place and he loses it. He loses it to the point of where his mouth is open and he's drooling. And I just said Ciel, right?
Yeah, you
and
did.
Sebastian is trying to get him back and snap him out of it. And you're just sitting there. You're so horrified in what you see all the way to the end that you kind of rewind it the last few minutes, because you're like, did I actually just see everything that I just saw? And yeah, you did see it. And for those of you who haven't seen it and you don't want spoilers, it's time to jump ahead now. And you get to see clearly Sebastian's purposes for being with Ciel, not only just to protect him and do his bidding, but once he gets Ciel back and you see him clinging to him, crying in horror, oh, as Rascal said, in seasons 1 and 2, you never saw this.
Right.
Because it had a whole different feel because it wasn't canon.
Right.
And now you get to see the manga is really rough.
Yeah.
It's really not for the lighthearted in terms of the backstory and what's happening with them. And he tells them that he wants them to take out
Everything.
the men that are involved. The first thing he says is, take them out. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And he says, as you wish. And immediately he wipes the 3 men out. And then he says, what do you want me to do? And he says, burn it all. Burn it to the ground. And he looks at him stunned, like, are you sure? And he says, you heard me. Do it. Do as I tell you. That's an order. And at first you're not sure why. And then you think about how the children are. And the investigations that will happen. And the torture they'll go through. Some more torture. Probably trying to lobotomize them during the time period. They can't be helped. They can't be helped. And Ciel, I guess he thinks it's a mercy to just burn everything connected and everyone connected to the ground and put them out of their misery. Because if you think about it, Ciel's technically already gone. His
In a
soul's
way,
already gone.
In a way, yeah. And you don't just have that. They also have the other half where they're trying to take, well, when they thought Ciel was different from his disguise, they were sending the circus troupe out to take him out all the way back at his mansion. So the staff in order to protect the house, and then during that point, all the circus troupe gets taken out because you see they really were taking the kids. They would put them under a hallucinogenic thing where they'd be seeing something really fun. So when they were doing deeds and things that were wrong, they didn't see anything wrong. They thought it was just fun and completely G-rated and everything, and they cover up their actions with that, like a clever censorship. But yes, they really were doing it to these kids. So yeah, this will not sit well with some people, I think.
So we have to say, despite all of that, it is a good season. It's just much harder and much darker than we were expecting.
Yeah.
And as Rascal said, the good news is public school art is fantastic. And it doesn't get dark till the end.
Right.
And yeah, it's really dark too. But
And
the
they
majority of
balance it.
except to the second and last episode, that gets really dark. The rest of it is interesting. You've got mystery and, of course, Ciel trying to figure out what's happened to the Queen's nephew, but more on that when we cover it. But this one is the darkest we've seen. And if this is canon to the manga, well, remember, it's got a lot of fans. As of March of this year, the Black Butler manga had over 35 million copies in circulation, making one of the best-selling manga series ever in the history of Japan.
Wow. So yeah, so whatever it's doing well to sell that much.
We've seen it in Japanese, and we've seen it dubbed in English. And we prefer the dubbed, possibly because we started with it, but I think mostly because of the performances of Palencia and Michael Tatum.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. It doesn't get better than this in terms of teamwork,
Right.
in terms of them vibing off each other, make each other better. And if you haven't, on Crunchyroll, there's a series called Anime Dungeon that had them as guests. I think it was the
two main stars.
19th or 20th episode.
Yeah.
And they appear on there, and you find out how long they've worked together, because this series originally went away for quite a while before it came back for public school art.
Right.
And it had been requested for years by fans. And they've also worked, as we found out, on a couple of other series together. But this was one of those projects that people really wanted back, never thought it would happen, and it's happened. And it's like they've never left.
Right.
So if you have seen Black Butler, Book of Circus, let us know in the comments. Are you an original fan? Have you read the manga? We would like to know. Tell us what you think. If you haven't seen Black Butler, Book of Circus, again, the entire series, including OVAs, now are available on Crunchyroll to watch.
Right.
No longer they're on Netflix. For some reason, Netflix didn't get the rights to it. And even what they did have is gone, so you can only see it on Crunchyroll. Manga is still available to buy on Amazon as well as Crunchyroll store.
Yes.
Come back, tell us what you think, but you really should watch the other two series prior if you love Book of Circus. But as we mentioned, since this is the only season that was canon up to that point, even if you don't watch the other two series, it won't matter.
Right.
It literally doesn't matter.
Right. They made it work. And if you haven't already, subscribe for updates and reviews for your anime series, anime shows, and all things animation.
Absolutely, and thank you so much again for joining us, sharing our videos, subscribing. We appreciate so much. You really have no idea. You are
special. Thank you so much for watching Mask Entertainment.
And Mom Entertainment.
Have a fantastic day.
Peace.